everyone, back at it again in my little gray crawdad. We're headed out onto the big lake again. We've got, I would say, not favorable conditions for fishing. We've got an east wind, got some clouds, I like the clouds, and this is pre-front, which is usually good except for the east wind. We got a rainstorm coming in tonight. So I like everything about these fishing conditions except for that east wind. The only thing worse is no wind at all. In that case, I'm probably better off going for trout or crappie or something like that. But especially in the spring, an east wind like this can really shut down the bite. And what I learned last year is that instead of going to spinning gear or some ultra-finessey stuff, I can use casting gear and just use bait finesse system, BFS gear, to downsize my presentation and get some fish to bite even in an east wind. So that's the plan for today, is I'm going to use BFS rod and reel and some downsized cranks to try to get the fish to eat even in the east wind. And the first thing I'm going to do, you see kind of on the horizon there's a little bit of a ripple where it's a little bit southeast mixed with the east wind. I want to get right into that wind line, and I'm going to start fishing from there. Alright, I'm fishing with Macbeth Flat. It's a Shimano flat-sided crankbait. The first fish I caught on this was a pickerel, but I cut that out of the video. So this is the second fish. And what I did is I hung it up on something. I popped the rod a couple times and just let it soak there for a second while I fidgeted with the motor. And that bass hit it on the paws. As soon as I picked up the reel again, started cranking, he was on it. So I think it's the change in direction, or maybe popping it free of something on the bottom. Something like that triggered the bite. And he's not a bad fish for BFS gear. That bait weighs 3/8 of an ounce. It's not really BFS gear, but it's a pretty small little crank, and it casts fine on the gear that I have. You know, the BFS fishing that I'm doing, it's not, flipping trout streams with 1/16 ounce spoons. I'm fishing bass gear for bass like that, and for that purpose, it works really well. Nice fat fish. Here's a closer look at the Macbeth Flat I was fishing, and if I run into shallower water, I just unsnap it. There's a little clip on the front, and put on another lure. And I decided I'd go with this ATV crank 1.0, and that's the oyster color. I don't think I've fished that bait last year. I think that's a pretty new bait. And I fished the 1.5 before, but the 1.0 is a newer bait for me. It comes with triple grips, and all I do is I take the split ring off the nose so I can use a 1.5 size decoy egg snap, and then I can clip those baits on and off easily. If the depth changes or the bite changes or whatever, I want to fish a different color, just pop them on and off easily. The 1.5 size, it's a little light, but it works for BFS gear. Most of the time I'm using the size 2 for like a jackhammer or a bigger crank, stuff like that. So I kept working my way around with the ATV crank, and I've hooked into something a little bit better. That's a nice smallie on light gear, and he's giving me a pretty good fight. I've got the net on the front deck. It's ready to go, and I just have to not lose it. And as long as I can keep him out of the shoreline cover, I should be good, as long as I don't horse him too much. The rod is a Genko double down BFS rod. It's a really great rod. I use it for all kinds of stuff. I don't have a lot of BFS gear yet, but I'm slowly building up my arsenal. And that reel is the new Arc Gravity BFS. It's based on the Hybo Arise reel. Just has, more Americanized features like the padded grips on the handle there, instead of plastic posts that are on the Hybo Arise. So far, I really like that reel. It casts further than the other BFS reels that I've tried. It does sound a little, like a wind-up toy a little bit, but I think that's the internal centrifugal brake working along with the magnets. But anyway, it cast pretty far. I had that reel loose for most of this trip, and I was casting directly into an east wind, and it did all right. I ended up backlashing, I think, 3 times. So, I mean, I made well over 100 casts. So 3 out of 100 is pretty good ratio. And like I said, I had that reel loose so I could get maximum distance. And I think next trip I'm just going to click it up a notch or two to get it to about the midline on the cast control. Hey, that's a nice smallie. He's about a 3-pound frame with a big gut, so he might go a little over 3. 3.5, something in that range. But yeah, once I figured out the pattern, I could just work this whole eastern shoreline with that ATV crank and oyster. And the nice thing about cranking with a BFS rod is that I can cover a ton of water, much more than I could with a little jerk bait or something like that, where you're, working it with slow pauses and things like that. So I was pretty happy with this system. That one's another largemouth. Hooked in the lips. Just need a little bit of room for my fingers to go. Get the pliers. It'll go faster with the pliers. Come on now. Those triple grips that come stock with the ATV crank, they're great. I don't see a need to change them. I think they're Mustad KVD triple grips. What are they? 1X strong, 2X short, something like that. And those are probably a size 6 on the 1.0 crank. But they work great. I like baits that I can just fish right out of the package, and I don't have to upgrade the hooks for another $5 or whatever it is to get a package of hooks nowadays. You see that? I got the lure stuck up in something, weeds or stump or stick or rocks or something, and I used the rod to kind of pop it free. And right after I did that, there was a bass on it. So that purposely running into stuff, changing direction, changing pace, all that stuff. If I'm not hitting anything, I'll work that crank with a stop and go retrieve, and it's fairly fast gear ratio on that little BFS reel. So I'm cranking and pausing, and if I hit something or get snagged up in something, I'll try to pop it free. The crankbait floats pretty high, so as soon as you stop reeling, it's going to want to back up and float up. All right, we reached another one of those shorelines with some rocks on shore. I don't know how well it shows up in the video, but I can see rocks on shore, which means there's probably rocks in the water too. And I know I caught 2 or 3 fish right in this little area here, and I was going through pretty fast. And that was the case again here. I ran into a rock and ricocheted off the rock, and as soon as I did that, the fish was on it. Nice. Hooked in the lips. Should be an easy release. Still get the pliers handy. It's not going to win any prizes, but I'm making progress here. Nice. This is only a cast or 2 later. I'm still in the same general area. Running into some rocks. I can feel them. You can feel them when you pop into them, or you pop into some weeds. You see me popping the rod, trying to get free of the stuff. And as soon as I did that, there's a fish on it. It's almost like they're following it or watching it, and they don't hit it. It's if you have just a steady, straight retrieve. They're waiting for it to make a mistake or do something different. And that one's another smallmouth. I think I caught mostly largemouth on this trip, but there was a few smallies mixed in. I think I caught, 3 or 4. He's fat too. He's stuffed. I don't know what he's eating. Maybe crayfish down there in the rocks. But he's not very big, but he's fat. He's eating up well. I'll keep going. I'm just on the other side of that point. The wind's starting to shift around a little bit from the northeast. So it's east, northeast. In the beginning, it was blowing a little bit southeast, but mostly east. I got another one. Same thing, trying to get that change in direction, bouncing off of stuff, ricocheting off of structure, popping free of weeds. And as soon as you do that, if there's a fish nearby, usually they'll eat it. Because I'm fishing pretty light line, I generally net all these fish. I only had them by one of those hooks in the back. And there's a largemouth. Seemed like the largemouth and smallmouth were all kind of sharing the same area together. He's not quite as fat as the smallie, but give him a few weeks, he'll fatten up. Nice. All right, I'm coming up to an inside turn off of a point. Inside turn just means either the left or right side of a point. There's a little curve there. And these are good spots for fish to push bait up onto the side of the point and kind of ambush them. I didn't see any bait today, but I assume that's why the fish are hanging out there. And it's not too rocky here except off the tip of the point, but there's weeds on either side of the point on the inside turn. And so I'm fishing the tips of the weeds there, and I'm trying to pop it free of the weeds once I feel myself ticking the tops there. And there was a bass there ready to eat it as soon as I popped it free. And this one has it kind of deep. Again, he's not hooked badly. He's just got it kind of deep. And it takes me a second. I got two tools with me all the time. I got a couple pairs of forceps and pliers. And sometimes the forceps can get in and do more precise work where pliers would kind of run out of space. Again, he's not hooked badly. He's just... he just has it kind of deep behind his tongue and in between his gill rakers. So I just have to find the right angle to get that hook free. And I'm going to dunk him, make sure he doesn't run out of oxygenated water so he can still breathe, and slide that hook back out. And he's going to be fine. See ya. Thanks for playing, bud. I'm working towards the end of this inside turn on the edge of the point. This is probably just another cast later. What was interesting is that the fish weren't off the end of the point. They had seemed like they were moving up. So sometimes early in the season you'll find them kind of stacked on the ends of points. I didn't get any off of points. They were all pushing inshore. And I think that's because we've had some warmer temperatures lately and warmer overnight temperatures too, which is super important in the spring. We've got another largemouth. He's not a giant, but I'll take him. But that little BFS crank is really paying dividends today. All right, I've worked my way around the point. I'm now on the other side, so there's inside turns on this side of the point too. Same thing, I'm cranking, trying to tick something, tick the tops of that grass, tick the tops of some weeds. And if I don't hit anything, I'll do a stop and go retrieve. And another one ate it. So for me, the BFS rod and reel and the little crank on an east wind, man, this is such a game changer. I didn't show it in the video, but I started out throwing a bigger crank, like a standard 1.5 size crank, and they didn't want it. And I really think that's to do with the east wind. On another day, like a southwest wind, they'd be all over that 1.5 size. Another smallie. He's in good shape, not quite as fat as the last one. I don't know if this is still considered inside turn. I think we're kind of past the inside turn portion, but I can see rocks on the shoreline again, which gets me excited. I'm going to try to bump into those rocks, ricochet off the rocks. there's any weeds mixed in, I'm going to try to tick the tops of those weeds and then pop it free of the weeds. I got another one. Yeah, the oyster color isn't one that I normally fish in the spring. I think I found it on sale somewhere and picked it up, mostly just because it was on sale and I wanted to try this size. But they seem to dig it. Now, I know smallmouth like that kind of bone color, that white color. They also like chartreuse. But I caught plenty of largemouth too with the oyster color. There are herring in this lake, and maybe they think it's a herring. I don't know. It could look like a baby bluegill too. Some of those little immature bluegill are pretty light. All right, I ran into this little shallow pocket, and I needed something that would run a little bit shallower. And so I put on a John Cruz Fat Baby 50. And this is a good crank that runs just a little bit shallower than the ATV crank, but a little bit deeper than that Yo-Zuri wake crank that I like so much. I mentioned that in previous videos. Anyway, if you fish too shallow, sometimes you run into the pickerel. And I had a pickerel following my bait, and I pulled it away from him. So I turned around and I cast into a little bit deeper water where there are some green weeds starting to poke up. And I could feel myself ticking the tops of those green weeds, even with that shallow running crank. And I got a largemouth to eat it. So with a snap on the end of my line, I can easily just swap out cranks as needed throughout the day. If I run into some deeper water, I'm putting the Macbeth flat on. If I'm, in kind of that 3 to 5 foot zone, I'm fishing the ATV crank. If I'm less than 3, I'm going to fish the Spro Baby Fat John. And, even shallower, that Yo-Zuri wake crank will run, I don't know, down to about 12, 14 inches, something like that. The wind's picking up a little bit more. It's kind of shifting around. It's a little bit more north now. And I think that's just because the storm's getting closer. And the wind's changing as the storm's getting closer. And it's also, the temperature's dropping. But I worked my way to the north side of the lake, and I managed one more fish on the ATV crank. And that was off of some docks. I guess there's probably some weeds mixed in too. Get my pliers out to get him a quick release. And that's it. I had a good afternoon out here. The BFS crank really saved the day for me. I really don't think I would have done as well without it. And so remember, if there's an east wind, sometimes blowing in the spring, try downsizing instead of trying to force them to eat bigger stuff, and you can have yourself a great day. All right, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll list all the gear in the video description, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!